Arshit also spoke to Nikita Kansati on the expectation of the Indian community from President Trump's administration. Let's listen in.
When it comes to a Trump America versus an Obama America, things are very different in the United States, especially from the perspective of South Asians and Indian Americans. We're now going to talk to Nikita Salati, who moved to D.C. in February to get that perspective. She works here in D.C. at the Hill with the Congressman. Nikita, thanks for joining us. You've been here a few months, about the same time that Donald Trump has been in office, since January. What's the sentiment been like in the U.S. when it comes to Indian Americans and the young mindset? How has that changed between an Obama era versus a Trump administration?
Well, I think with a lot of President Trump's rhetoric, especially around people of color and Indian and Muslim Americans, anyone from South Asia, things that he said about people who are basically non-white has made a lot of those communities more vulnerable, has made hate crimes and violence against those communities a lot more, you feel it more. As someone who's grown up in the States and has lived here my entire life, this has always been home, and to see an administration change from one that's very welcoming and open to one that's very much not has definitely been something that's very, very perceptible.
We were actually covering the elections in New York when it was a face-off between Clinton and Trump, and there were a lot of younger South Asians, Indian Americans, who were visibly upset, saying that they were shocked, they were surprised, sort of the sentiment across the board. What are you hoping for over the next 4 years? In the last 6 months, do you feel like anything has been accomplished, and where do you see the rest of the term go as far as Indian American is concerned in terms of Trump in the White House?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of change that can happen. So I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign, and so definitely felt that pain and that sadness and that change when President Trump was elected, and think that many of his ideas may or may not come to fruition. We have, a Congress and that, provides this excellent system of checks and balances. But I work for a member who recently introduced a piece of legislation that's very supportive for Indian Americans and other high-skilled immigrants who come to this country. And so seeing something like that, be passed into law and be signed into law by the president would be huge. So I think a lot of people are still doing good work. There's a lot of people who are now energized because of what they see on the federal level to make change on the local level. And so I think as South Asian communities get more and more engaged, there is a real power there. So even if at the federal level, even if the administration is not entirely working for South Asian communities, people who are doing amazing things locally still have a lot of power.
And lastly, there is a little bit of concern, at least from an Indian perspective, about H-1B visas and jobs. A lot of students coming here to study. The international community, the Indian American, have one of the highest earning brackets. But with the Trump administration, there's a little bit of trepidation. Have you seen that, or is there a chatter amongst the youth here when it comes to, perhaps people don't want to come to the U.S. anymore or rely on those H-1B visas, which may be harder to get, or even the student who decide to study or to get a higher degree, perhaps a bit of trepidation and fear? Has that resonated with the younger Indian Americans?
The ones that I do know, absolutely. I can think of cousins abroad and family abroad that are incredibly bright, incredibly hardworking, would be an asset to this country, but see other destinations as good places to work now, or even better places to work because their future is a little bit more stable, their visa situation would be easier, and so I think that's really a loss.
All right, Nikita Salati, getting us perspective from the young Indian American mindset. So there you have it when it comes to H-1B visas or race relations. There is a little bit of trepidation here in Washington, D.C. The big question is, how much will that change over the course of the next 4 years when Trump is in the White House? Reporting in Washington, D.C., Archit Seshadri, WION.